Hello again everybody, and welcome to Test Flight in the AJS-37 Viggen. This is a brand new aircraft module that's due out very soon for DCS World, and the developers, Familiarization Simulations, were kind enough to share this pre-release build with me to put through its paces and to share that with all of you. And I should point out that since this is a pre-release build, that not everything that you see here throughout the series is going to represent the final version of the aircraft. There is bound to be some little tweaks or big tweaks that still need to be made, so keep that in mind as we go here. Now, the Viggen itself is a Swedish-built ground attack aircraft. The airframe entered service in the early 70s in different variants, some as fighters, some, like this variant, as ground attack aircraft. There were photographic reconnaissance aircraft as well, and the aircraft that we have here represents an early 90s upgrade of the ground attack aircraft. And this aircraft is all about getting down on the deck, going fast, and then making one pass on the target and getting out of there. And it's really sort of built around Swedish doctrine of dispersing aircraft to locations other than the main airfield. So this aircraft is going to be able to take off and land in a very short distance from rugged terrain, including highways, and I'm going to give that a shot at some point here as we go in the series. And along with that Swedish doctrine that is built around, it's geared heavily towards the anti-shipping role. So we're going to have a radar that is tuned to finding ships out here over the Black Sea in this case, as well as being able to serve as a navigation aid. So let me go ahead and actually enable the radar if I can here, as I'm getting interrupted by an F-16 out the window. Okay, I'm in position A1 on the stick, and I'm going to get into all about how this works once I figure it out, because the test flight series is simply documenting my technique for learning the aircraft from scratch. This is absolutely my first time taking the aircraft up. I have so far mapped controls and only know the basics after having read through the manual a couple of times, and I'll have a link to the manual that you can go to. It's a draft format manual, but the link is available in the video description if you want to check it out and read along with me as we go. So everything that I do in this series is not going to be a tutorial, although a lot of people do learn aircraft along with me as I go, and it's definitely not intended to be a review because, well, I simply don't do reviews. If I didn't think this was up to some sort of standard that I've set, then I wouldn't do a video for it, but you'll be able to tell as we go whether this is something you would be interested in or not. Now, weapons capability of the aircraft, it's again geared heavily towards anti-shipping and air-to-ground. So for this flight, I picked just a standard loadout, or what looked like something pretty standard to me, of some RB-75 missiles, or in other words, Swedish versions of the AGM-65 Mavericks that we're all familiar with, as well as an ECM pod and a countermeasures pod. And I also have a couple of Swedish variants of the AIM-9s. I think these are actually AIM-9L models that I have, and actually in the radar right now I'm getting all kinds of ahead of myself, but I have 3 returns right there that are off of 3 ships that I have positioned out there in the water, and yeah, I can see them right there. So yeah, I'm already getting into systems. Let me finish the introduction, and then we'll start to look at things in more detail. Other weapons options are going to include anti-shipping missiles that will have all kinds of capabilities when it comes to pre-planning, how they select targets, and how they engage targets as they're in their terminal guidance phase. We're going to have the standard fare of rocket pods and general purpose bombs, as well as a radio-commanded, visually guided bomb. So it's kind of like an old AGM-12 bullpup on the US side, where you launch the missile and then a flare in the back of it fires, and then you, using a stick, I think it's this one right here, guide the missile visually down to the target. I can't wait to give all this stuff a shot. There's also a standoff CVU type weapon that we can use to engage targets from a distance, and several different display, radar, and computer modes that we're going to be using to engage targets. Now, the aircraft itself is a 90s upgrade of the ground attack variant, so it has some pretty advanced targeting capabilities built in, but it's nothing like, say for example, the A-10, where we have basically point and click type indications in the HUD telling us where these weapons are going to impact. A lot of the weapon system is going to depend on how well the navigation system is aligned and how vigilant the pilot is when it comes to keeping the aircraft system squared away and feeding the right information into the system. Something just as simple as being off by 50 feet in altitude is going to result in a very, very big miss distance for rockets, bombs, or anything that we would employ from this aircraft. And this is sort of a pre-GPS system aircraft, so the navigation system is going to drift on us, and we'll get into operation and how to correct all that stuff as we go. So if having a look at all of that and figuring out how it all works sounds interesting to you, feel free to stick around. I'm going to go ahead and start to dig into things right now a little earlier in the process than I normally do, because I've been using extensively the Autopilot as I've been going here. I haven't manually flown the aircraft at all. I've basically just got the aircraft in the air, depress the ATT button right there. That puts me into an attitude hold autopilot mode, and then when it's in that mode, I can, using the trim hat on the stick, tell the aircraft to turn. So if I go trim left, it puts me into a left-hand bank. If I go trim right, it levels me out again and holds this heading. If I go trim right again, it puts me into a right-hand bank. And in fact, if I want to put myself into a climb, I go trim up, and the nose comes up. If I want to go back down, I go trim hat down, and the nose goes down. And then we have another autopilot mode we can engage. If we click this button, then the altitude hold autopilot mode kicks in, that has the same functionality when it comes to the trim hat, except that now trimming up and down changes the reference altitude. So if I trim down right now, it's going to designate a new lower altitude for it to hold me in at, and it's about to, the nose is coming up and it's going to level me out at that new reference altitude. And also in this mode, I get an advisory light down here telling me that the terrain below me is outside of certain limits, and I also get some indications in the HUD, and we'll have to dig into that a little bit more. And let me just go ahead and put it back into the basic mode for me. And we can see that by default the SPAK light is on, and that's just a flight control dampening system, and I've taken control manually of the aircraft for the first time here. So let me go ahead and take this opportunity to explore the handling of the aircraft a little bit with the dampening autopilot on, and this is just adding small corrections to the flight control surfaces to damp out any oscillations. And I'll actually turn it off real quick, and for example, if I roll right and then release the stick, you can see I've got a little bit of a yaw oscillation going that as the nose comes down, it really doesn't damp out. If I pull the nose up and release the stick, it's just sort of oscillating around. Now if I do the same thing with the dampener engaged, release the stick, and it oscillated once and then steadied out. Now the aircraft is just sort of slicing downwards. Pull the nose up, release, one cycle, and it just damps out right there and keeps the nose pointing basically where I left it. Now airspeed, I'm going about Mach 0.68, 720 or so kilometers per hour. Now I need to watch my AOA indexer right here, and I want to watch my accelerometer, which will be right here, G meter. So let me just, at Mach 0.68, I've got my throttle up to full mil power without afterburner. So pulling, 10 degrees AOA, that gets me about 4 Gs. Speed is starting to bleed off, and of course as the AOA ramps up, I'll ramp it up to about 15. More AOA equals more drag, so you can see the airspeed indicator really bleeding off, and as the airspeed bleeds off, then therefore the G loading bleeds off. So let me go ahead and engage the afterburners. And we heard those clicks right there as the different stages of the afterburner kicked in. We have the lights down here telling me that the third stage of the afterburner is engaged. I'll pull the throttle back, second stage, first stage, and off. So let me go ahead and re-engage it. Now accelerating through about Mach 0.75. Now let me put it into a turn. I'll get some G's on the aircraft. I won't exceed 5 G's or so due to the stores that I have on the aircraft, and I'm able to sustain, starting to bleed off a little bit, but I can almost sustain a 5G turn right there, which is actually better performance than I was expecting. That's a very, very powerful afterburner that we have right there. I'm going to pull it out and try that again, starting in Mach 0.8. See what kind of a sustained turn that I can get right here. And this is the most unscientific way of doing this imaginable. I'll just make it a 4G turn. And that afterburner makes a heck of a difference right there, because I was starting to really bleed off speed right there with just a little 4G turn on the aircraft. And the aircraft is definitely not intended to be a dogfighter. It's just all about getting down on the deck and going fast. That's what this aircraft does well. And the reason that I fly the aircraft around a little bit like this and get a feel for how it handles is that the next time I take the aircraft up, it's going to be from a cold start. And by flying the aircraft around a little bit and just having a look around the cockpit, I'll be able to tell what normal looks like and be able to spot things that aren't working properly or aircraft handling that isn't what I was expecting, and be able to tell if something is wrong. Now, let me hold the throttle back. I'll extend the speed brakes. And yeah, I can hear them extended out there, and I can't from this view see them, but there are speed brakes on top of the aircraft and below. I'll get down to about 500 or so, speed brakes back in, and now we just get some AOA on the aircraft. I'll take it up to about 15 degrees AOA, pull the throttle back in. I just want to feel, kind of like this in sort of a landing type airspeed, how it responds in roll. And yeah, there's a lot of, well, not much, there's not really much yaw associated with roll at all. Now if I blend in some rudder, yeah, there we go, I can control it with rudder, and there we go, I've got an indication right there. I think that was associated with just a impending stall. I can actually feel the buffet right now, 400 kilometers per hour, about 11 degrees AOA. So we definitely get a good warning when it comes to an onset of a stall, and I'll chance taking it even further down here at low altitude. And getting up above 15 degrees AOA, 300 kilometers per hour, I'm going to have to knock this off really quickly here. Okay, about 18, and yeah, let me go ahead and put the nose down, engage the afterburner. Yeah, definitely a lot of buffet and a lot of warning before we actually get to a stall. Now I'm wondering what that little tone was that I had. With the afterburner engaged, let me see if I can get or see what AOA the warning tone kicks in. And right about there, about 15, 16, 17 degrees of AOA is where a audible tone kicks in, and I believe that would be associated with the stick shaker as well if I had like a force feedback type joystick system. And the other thing that I always do on this very first flight is just have a look around the cockpit to get familiar with the overall layout, so that I know in general where the systems are located, so that the next time that I go back to the manual and start to read about procedures, I'll have a better understanding of where everything is and where to go when it calls out a specific switch or a specific panel. So let me just do that now, starting from the back left, working my way around. So we have a landing gear handle and then an auto throttle lever. Actually, I'm tempted to engage the auto throttle. What that's going to do is hold me at 550 kilometers per hour, which I'm already at right now. In fact, let me do that real quick, and I get an indication right there, AFK, and it's just going to manipulate the throttle to keep me at more or less the same airspeed that I am right now, 550 kilometers per hour. Okay, this panel is going to be associated with weapon system controls and the AIM-9 or Swedish AIM-9 missiles we have out there loaded. I've got a panel coming forward for cockpit lighting. I've already turned on some of the floodlights and some of the indicator lights just at a low intensity. Forward of that, I have some alternate flight control system controls, emergency pitch, trim, and yaw controls right there. I've got a radio system control right here, and we see as we go around that everything is in Swedish. I'm not sure actually if the intent from Leatherneck is to do an English language cockpit. I'm sure if this isn't to somebody's taste that Deverum and the usual suspects will start to roll out some cockpit modifications with English language, but this I don't think is really going to be that difficult. Swedish is actually not too terribly different from English in basic terms. Okay, forward of that we have the radar controls to include a stick that could be used to slew crosshairs on the radar and do some other functions, and we have all the controls for the indications. We have a master mode switch right there. Right now I'm in the nav master mode, and we'll see the significance of that once we get into weapons employment. Now we have the throttle right here, as well as some engine and electrical related controls just forward of that. Canopy, close, lock, unlock lever right there. We have trim indications, some pressure gauges, more radio controls right here with push buttons to get us onto different frequencies, and all of these will be able to be set and configured within the mission editor, which I'll look at once I get the aircraft recovered and on the ground. Let me just put myself into a right hand bank and engage it in altitude hold just to hold me in right here. Okay, forward of the radio controls we have a caution warning panel. We have the thrust reverser lever handle right here, so once I'm ready to land I can pull that out. Actually, I think I can do that, yeah, right here without hurting anything. This light comes on telling me that the thrust reverser is armed, so as soon as, I think it's the right main landing gear is compressed, and it senses weight on wheels, the thrust reverser is going to automatically engage once I land it. I might do that. I'm curious to see that in action. I might do that at the very end here. And I'll push it back in, light goes off, and I don't think I broke anything right there. So coming around, I have the autopilot controls we've been looking at. Up there to the left, I have basic flight instruments and more radio system controls. I have the radar display that is also going to give me some navigation information. So I can see that my next steer point is actually at a course of about 291 degrees. So if I wanted to steer in that direction, I could do it using this indicator. And this is also going to, in addition to the radar, give us some RWR indications around the edge. I will play with that a little later, I guess. Now coming to the right side, more flight instrumentation, engine instruments, and we have a navigation indicator right here telling us our current navigation point and also the distance. So to L1, which is the landing airfield, I have about 37, 38 kilometers to go. Fuel quantity indicator just below that. I have another caution warning panel over here on the right side. Oxygen system controls. I have the interface for the flight computer, and this flight computer is going to do a lot for the aircraft, whether we see it directly or not. Really, the only display associated with the computer, in addition to just miscellaneous stuff around the cockpit that it runs, are these 6 digits right here. Actually, let me put it into AKT POS, and this is present position, so it's giving us in longitude and then latitude 6 digits of our present position. It has other display modes we can put it into that, yeah, I have no idea what any of these are going to do for now, but that's what we're going to figure out as we go. We can input data into the computer using these buttons right here, and it almost reminds me of the old Apollo guidance computer type inputs where you have nouns and verbs, so you can put it into either in or out, so it's either receiving information or feeding you information depending on the position of this switch, and then you type in whatever command that you want to input to the computer in numeric format, push a button, it will be, yeah, this one right here, and that feeds in the information or updates the information or creates new steer points or whatever you want it to do. So that's going to take some figuring out as we go. To the right of that, we have some buttons, and these are going to point us in the direction if we're in the, I think it's this one, AKT POS, and I'll just sort of do shorthand for a lot of the stuff that's in Swedish as I go. Current position mode, if I select, for example, B2, yeah, now the navigation system is going to point us to B2, and B2 is 15 kilometers away. B3, B1, and we could go back to, yeah, there we go, hitting that button puts us back to L1, that original spot that we were on. But a lot more to come on that as we go. Just above that, we have weapon system controls with a selector that we can rotate to select different weapons. For example, I just selected the AIM-9s, and we can see, and I'm just going to call these AIM-9s until I start to dig into more of the weapon system, but I can hear the Seeker growl. Miscellaneous switches just above that. Coming back to IFF panel, which is not implemented. No aircraft in DCS really does IFF. In back of that, we have probably, let me see, this is countermeasures, and this is controlling the jammer, the ECM pod that I have loaded. Then the countermeasure pod controlled from right here. Lighting for formation and external lighting, and then just some miscellaneous testing type switches back here in the back, and some circuit breakers right here for key systems in case we need to quickly remove power from one of these systems for some reason. And now, armed with that information, the next time I go to the manual and start to read through the pages, I'll have at least some idea of where to look in the cockpit and where a lot of these things are, and you start to see the flow when it comes to, in general, where things are. So I know engine stuff is over here by the throttle. I know all the radar stuff is right here. Comms right here. Flight instruments, radar up here. If I need navigation, it's to the right. If I need lighting, it's to the right. Weapons up here to the right. And every nationality, and in fact every aircraft manufacturer, has their own sort of flow to a cockpit, and figuring that out initially really does make things a lot easier. I actually do want to do a little bit more than I usually do. Usually at this point I exit the aircraft and head back to the menu to have a look at missions and have a look at options that are available to us there. I was reading up before I started this in the manual on procedures for engaging targets with these AGM-65s or RB-75s. Now I have the RB-75s selected right there as the current weapon. So let me go ahead and disengage the autopilot. Let me disengage the auto throttle. Let me make sure I don't get the gear handle by mistake. Okay, throttle is disengaged. I have manual control of the aircraft and the throttle at this point. So let me go ahead and roll it out. And I have these ships out here set up for this specific action. Now, to be able to see what the Mavericks are seeing, we have this display up here mounted to the right. And to get this to work, I need to put the master mode selector into A and F. I'll do that first. Yeah, there we go. That gets us the display right up there. And if let me see, I'll position myself and I'll zoom in a little bit, and we can see the entire bounds of the display there. The intent here would be, I think, to almost just put your eye up to the display if you were actually in a real Viggen. And also backed up on the HUD, I think this reticle is going to be more or less bore-sighted to the position of the missile field of view. So, okay, yeah, there we go. Now let me go ahead and, this is going to take some technique to get used to. Let me go ahead and get one of these ships more or less centered up. It's going to be too far out right now to get a lock, and this is just basically standard AGM-65 fare. I would, if I mapped the appropriate controls, be able to slew the display around, just like we're used to doing on other aircraft with AGM-65s. Now let me pull the throttle in so I don't get going too fast. And once we get into a good firing range here, I believe I'm just going to be able to... Yeah, there we go. I've actually got a lock right now on that first ship. I have no idea how far out I am. I'm going to have to figure out where in the aircraft that's telling me. I'm sure it's probably telling me somewhere. Well, I'm going to take the first shot. I think I'm going to take the first shot. Okay, it's inhibited. Possibly... Oh, yeah, obviously it's inhibited because I don't have the trigger guard pulled up. Okay, so now the guard is up. Okay, first missile is away. Let me come off the left and we'll watch this missile go in on the first ship. And AGM-65s are fire and forget weapons, so once it's off, I would normally want to probably go in the opposite direction about now, but I want to see this missile go in and impact the ship. And there we go, we got a good hit on the first try. So, well, I'm going to continue to push my luck here on this very first sortie. I'm going to try to land right up here and to use the thrust reverser feature. So let me go ahead and arm the thrust reverser. I've got the light on telling me that as soon as my right, I think I could prove myself wrong here as we go, I think it's the right main gear touches down, the thrust reverser is going to automatically engage. So let me take my time. I'll try to set up on a more or less passable approach right here, see the thrust reverser in action, and then move into the menu and see what all is going to be included with the module, and then start to really dig into the systems and operation of the aircraft. I'll be right back.